Okay, welcome to this week's Parsha, Parshas Mikeitz, Shabbos Chanukah. Lots of interesting things. Let me begin just with one idea I mentioned last year, but I want to add something to it. A fascinating thing. We know that at the end of every Parsha, if you look in your Chumash, the Chumash tots up, it adds up the number of psukim in that particular Parsha. When one of my children was younger, he's got a good maths brain. And to keep him busy and engaged in shul, I would sometimes ask him a question, which Sedra has more psukim? I don't know, Parshas Mikeitz or Parshas Vayeshev. And he soon caught on the trick that if you just go to the end of the Sedra, you'll see it actually lists how many psukim there are in each Sedra. But there's something very interesting in Parshas Mikeitz, and that is, not only does it list the number of psukim, it also tells me the number of words in the Sedra. And that is the only time it does it throughout in the entire Chumash. Only in Parshas Mikeitz it tells us that there are, if you look at the first box, if you're listening online, please email me at j.golker@gmail.com, send you the handout. In the first box, the final pasuk of Parshas Mikeitz, it says, "Vayomer cholili lias me'asozeh, ho'ish asher nimtza gavir biyado hu yeh li eved, va'atem alu l'shalom el avichem." The final, very dramatic end of Parshas Mikeitz. Then it says, Kuf Mem Vov Psukim, 146 Psukim, Yechizkiyahu Siman, Amatzia Siman, Yeh Li Eved Siman. Those three are the three Simonim. Each of those words, they add up to 146. V'tevas Alpaim Chofei, and there are 2,025 words in Parshas Mikeitz. Very unusual. Why does the Torah tell us the number of words in this Sedra? So, last year we mentioned a very geschmack of Vilna Gaon. If you look at the second box, the pasuk says, "Vayikra Paro Shem Yosef Sofnas Paneach." Paro renamed Yosef. He was called Sofnas Paneach. Vayitzen lo es Osnas Bas Potifera Kohen Oin, and he was given a wife. Her name was Osnas, the daughter of Potifera Kohen Oin. Now there is debate about whether the word Potifera is one word or two. And in Temani Sifrei Torah, apparently it's one, and others it's two words. Says the Vilna Gaon, in his typical genius way, look at the next box, that's the reason why it says 2,025 words. Shalu lahagra, they asked the Vilna Gaon, this is from the Pninim Mishulchan Hagra La Torah, Lama b'Mesorah achrei kol parsha kosav schum ha'psukim shel parsha. Why is it that at the end of every Sedra we're told the number of psukim, ve'ilu b'Parshas Mikeitz kosav gam schum ha'tevas, but yet in Parshas Mikeitz we're told the number of words in the Sedra as well. On the Rabbeinu, the Vilna Gaon responded, Shezois kadei lodia in Potifera hu shtei tevos achas. It comes to teach us whether or not Potifera is two words or one. Now, I didn't count up the words, so I didn't know if 2025 includes Potifera as one word or two words, but either way, it will resolve that particular problem. I think most Chumoshim have it as two words, but like I say, I think the Temani Sifrei Torah have them as one word. But anyway, that's the Vilna Gaon. Now, that I think I said last year. I think I also mentioned a very geschmack Torah Tamima, which is brought in the Art Scroll Chumash at the end there, that it alludes to Chanukah as well, because Chanukah invariably falls, Shabbos Chanukah invariably falls in the week of Mikeitz, and it's Shabbos Chanukah is invariably Parshas Mikeitz, and the number 2025 is significant, says the Torah Tamima, that the gematria of the word ner, a candle, a light, is 250, nun reish. The 8 nights of Chanukah, so 250 times 8 is 2,000, plus Chof Hei Kislev, the 25th of Kislev, when Chanukah begins, makes a total of 2,025. Okay, that's very geschmack. Now, I think I said all of that last year, but I just want to mention one extra point, and that is, very interestingly, the Siman, there is one other Parsha, maybe there are others, I'm not aware of it, but there's one other Parsha, certainly in Sefer Bereshis, which also has 146 Psukim, and that is Parshas Bereshis itself. Parshas Bereshis has Kuf Mem Vav Psukim, and moreover, the two of the three Simonim that we have for Parshas Mikeitz, i.e. Yechizkiyahu Simon, Amatzia Simon, and then Yeh Li Eved Simon, to the first two, Yechizkiyahu and Amatzia, are also the same Simonim for Parshas Bereshis. In other words, if you turn to the end of Parshas Bereshis, which we learned just after Sukkot, it would also finish off. The Chumash will tell you that there are 146 psukim, and those are the two simonim. Amatzia, the gematria is 146. Yechizkiyahu is also gematria 146. What's the connection? Why is it that they have the same simonim? So David Feinstein, the article, often quotes his comment because he went through every single simon to explain what the deeper meaning is, and he says something fascinating. David Feinstein explains that Bereshis, the theme of Bereshis really, is proclaiming HaKadosh Baruch Hu's all-powerful mastery as creator of the universe. Now, in Parshas Mikeitz, we encounter Paro, who considers himself a god. We encounter Egypt, who are worshipping the Nile as a deity, and through the means, through the devices of famine, of plenty, and generally orchestrating from on high, HaKadosh Baruch Hu displays his continued running of the world. So the common theme is that not only in Parshas Bereshis does the Sedra proclaim HaKadosh Baruch Hu's masterful creation of the universe, but Parshas Mikeitz shows his orchestration and puppeteering of events from on high. And Paro and his people were forced to acknowledge that they were subservient to Yosef. The end of the Parsha shows us that whatever Yosef decreed, they're going to have to listen to him. And therefore Yosef, they're subservient to Yosef, who declared that whatever his position was, whether it was slave or viceroy, he remained an Eved Hashem. So you see the connection between the two is the fact that HaKadosh Baruch Hu runs the world, has an ongoing oversight of its unfolding, of the unfolding of history, and that is really reflected in the story that which the Parsha of Mikeitz began with Paro considering himself a god, Egypt worshipping the river Nile as a deity, and then HaKadosh Baruch Hu orchestrating events through famine, through plenty, and through lots of other different means, demonstrating that the people, Paro and the people, were forced to acknowledge that they were subservient to Yosef. He is going to store the food, distribute it, and he can decide and run the show. And Yosef himself declared that he himself is million Eved Hashem, and he did so whether he was a slave, whether he was a viceroy of Egypt. So a very interesting idea. Now, let's move on. I came across a fabulous idea in the writings of Rabbi Franz. Let's turn to that. At the beginning of the Parsha, Paro has his dream and he is agitated. He has two dreams and he is very, very agitated, and he can't find satisfaction in the answers that his advisors are giving him. So the butler and the baker pipe up, or the butler actually, and says, there was a fellow in prison with me and he was a very good interpreter of dreams. They bring out Yosef, familiar story, and he interprets the dreams. Now, let's look at the Psukim. If you look at the next box, the Pasuk says, Vayomer Yosef al Paro chalom Paro echad. What does Yosef do? He explains that your two dreams, Paro, it's one common theme. Sheva Paras Hatovas Sheva Shonim, that the 7 cows represent 7 good years. Sheva Hashibolim Hatovas Sheva Shonim, Chalom Echad, it's all one dream. Sheva Shonim Bois, Svar Godel, there's going to be tremendous plenty. B'chol Eretz Mitzrayim, V'komu Sheva Shnei Rav, but then that's going to be followed by 7 years of famine. V'nishkach Kol HaSoiva, and all the good is going to be forgotten. V'chila ha'aretz ha'arav es aretz, and the famine will destroy the land. V'ata yeri par ish noven v'chacham, etc., etc. Now, my friend very powerfully describes 2 scenarios, and again, it's sometimes we're so familiar with the story we overlook that. Imagine one scenario: you've got a high-powered law firm, and they're considering a very tough case, and all the partners in the conference room, and they're trying to figure out what is the best legal approach to take in this case, and they can't figure out a good plan. Suddenly, the guy from the mail room walks in to the conference room. He hears the issues that the lawyers are discussing, and he makes a suggestion. And the entire legal team of earning $1,000 an hour, very successful, high-powered lawyers, they turn around and they say, you know what? This guy knows what he's talking about. Scenario number 1. Scenario number 2. A group of medical specialists are trying to diagnose a patient and to determine a course of treatment for a very mysterious illness. And they don't know what to do. They're discussing it and they're sort of groping in the dark. Suddenly, an orderly who is merely trained to assist a patient's daily living activities walks in and then suggests a plan for how to treat the patient. All the doctors are blown away by the suggestion, and they tell the orderly, you know what? You only have sort of high school education in medical for medicine, but you're right. I think we'll go with that. Now, what are the chances of either of those scenarios happening? As Rabbi Fran put it, it's between 0 and none. That's not going to happen. If I'm earning $1,000 an hour as a top lawyer, I should listen to a little kid from the mailroom? Or if I'm a great doctor, great physician, am I going to listen to an orderly? People's egos generally won't let that happen. And yet, the Torah says, "Vayitav hadova be'enei Paroi." He was very happy. He was very happy with it. And uve'enei kol avodov. Not only was Paro happy with it, all the avod of all of his advisors and servants around him were very happy. Now, how could that be? How could it be that Yosef walks in, and where was he coming from? He was coming from prison. He'd been there for 12 years. So just imagine the scene. Here in London, there's a famous jail called Wormwood Scrubs. You get a guy who went to work, who's schlepped out of Wormwood Scrubs because apparently he's very good at interpreting dreams, or a local detention center, and he comes in and he tells a room full of experts, this is the correct course of action. He's going to have zero credibility. Why on earth do they all listen to him? And not only do they listen to him, how could it be? So Rabbi Fran says a very beautiful idea. Yosef was aware of this exact problem, exactly this challenge. He knew that if he merely suggested an interpretation, no one's going to believe him. Not a chance. Therefore, Yosef added a very important detail to the solution to his problem, and that is this. If you carry on looking at the Psukim, the Pasuk says, "Va'ato yere Paro ish novim v'chacham v'yishiseu al eretz Mitzrayim." You, Paro, have to appoint a wise man who's going to be second only to Paro, and he is going to be the viceroy, and he's going to organize this. So every single advisor in the room thought, who is this wise and discerning individual? Of course it's me. Who's he going to appoint? Of course it's going to be me. Every advisor assumed that they were going to be this chosen one. And therefore, they all agreed to Yosef's plan. This has echoes in Megillas Esther, because the Pasuk says in Perek Vav, in Pasuk Vav of Megillas Esther, again, very familiar Pasukim, Vayovoi Haman vayomer hamelech ma la'asos be'ish asher hamelech chofetz bikaro. Remember the story? That night, Balayla noded Ashnas hamelech, Achashverosh, couldn't sleep, and Haman is walking around, and he comes in, and Achashverosh is worried about maybe someone's plotting to kill me, and someone maybe gave me and honored me, and what shall I do? I haven't paid him back, and he says to him, Ma la'asos be'ish asher hamelech chofetz bikaro. Haman is thinking in his heart, who does he want to honor more than me? Of course he wants to honor me. In other words, that's just as a reflection of what we just said. That he turns around, Haman thinks himself is referring to me, because he's got a big ego, he's thinking it's referring to himself. That is why Yosef not only explained his dream, but he also suggested a solution for it. And who asked Yosef to advise Paro? Yosef was asked to interpret Paro's dream, not tell Paro what to do. He wasn't told him, he was just told him to interpret the dreams. He didn't tell him to roll out the solution as well. But the answer is that Yosef knew what he was up against, and he understood that if all Paro's advisors are going to be there, if he just interprets the dream, they will belittle it and they will reject it. But once the advisors heard that the interpretation created an opportunity for a CEO, a viceroy of Egypt, then every advisor thought to himself, that's me. I can be the CEO. I'm CEO material. I can be the viceroy. So Yosef, with absolute genius, realized that the only way he could interpret the dreams was by going through, and these interpretations to be accepted, was to come up with a solution, to appoint a wise man, and an opportunity to be appointed CEO, and each advisor would therefore accept the interpretation, thinking that they could make it as the CEO. Fabulous idea. Okay, let's move on to one final idea, and this again is also a remarkable idea. Take a look. This is in the next box. The Pasuk says, like I mentioned earlier, Vayikra Paro Shem Yosef Sofnas Panech. Paro changes the name of Yosef to Sofnas Panech, and he gives him a wife. Vayitin lo es Osnas bas Potifera kohen oin leisha vayetze Yosef al eretz Mitzrayim. Okay, Rashi tells me that Potiphera is actually Potiphar, who he worked for in those years earlier, and explains the change of the name. But Osnas is the daughter of Eshes Potiphar and Potiphar, who were involved in last week's Sedra, who tried to seduce Yosef, and she saw Baruch HaKodesh, as Rashi mentions in last week's Sedra. But either way, Paro gave Yosef Osnas bas Potiphera, the wife, the daughter of Potiphera, and Eshes Potiphera. Okay, now, an amazing Das Zakenim. Says the Das Zakenim, if you look at the last box, Sofnas Paneach. First of all, the name that Yosef got, a very interesting name, Sofnas Paneach, says the Das Zakenim, it's an otrikon, it's an acronym. For what? Sofnas stands for Tzadik Pitpeit Neged Ta'avosoi. That he recognized that Yosef was a tzaddik who was in control of his taiva, of his desires. And Paneach is Potiphar ono nafshay chinom, he calls himself, he afflicted his soul for nothing, which I think is a reference to what Rashi explains, Ayin Shom. Now, here's the main point. Vayitzin lo es Osnas. Take a look at this Das Zakenim. Paro gave Yosef a wife whose name was Osnas. V'im Toma. Yosef shoya melech eich noso bas hedget. Yosef was a king. He was a melech. How could he marry a simpleton? Says the Das Zakenim two answers. The first one is a short one, v'nirali from Lefi, shemitchila hoya Yosef Eved lePotiphar, because originally Eved was Yosef was an Eved for Potiphar. Oma baliboyim lo yaseretzoino elisabitoi. If I don't take his accept his suggestion to marry his daughter, Yizal Zaleni, he'll make life impossible for me. V'yalshno sishi yisi avdoi. And he'll be malshin me, and he'll say that I was an Eved. It's going to cause a lot of problems, and therefore let me marry her. He'll treat me well, and he'll honor me, and therefore life will be a lot easier. Okay, that's the first answer. But there is a second answer which is astonishing. Shenosa, why did Yosef marry Osnas? Because she was none other than the granddaughter of Yaakov Avinu. How so? Because the Pirish Rashi Parsha Vayishlach the Bas Dina Hoysem Shchem. Because when Shchem violated Dina in last week's Sedra, they had a child. This was the child. V'tola lo Yaakov Avinu kamiyah betzavara. Yaakov Avinu put a necklace around her neck with a kamiyah, with an amulet, with some writing on it. V'hishlicha v'huva leMitzrayim. You see, what happened was, when Shchem abducted Dinah and she became pregnant with the child, Yaakov Avinu saw that the family, this is based on Midrashim, based on various Midrashim, it's brought in a few places, that the family was ashamed of this new granddaughter, and the little girl was banished, she was sent away from the camp, and she was placed under a thorn bush. The word osnas is a derivative of the word sneh, the Hebrew word for a thorn bush. And then says the Das Zakenim that the Yaakov Avinu put a kamiyah, an amulet, round her neck, and was sent down to Egypt, through a nace, and Potiphar actually raised her in his house. And that's why she was called after his name, because he was the adopted father. That he was also named, even though he wasn't the biological mother with Basya, but he was, she adopted him, so therefore he was considered a son. Well, so too, Osnas bas Potiphera, because she adopted him and raised him. And when Yosef was passing through the wall of Egypt, all of the ladies came out of their homes to see the splendor, the beauty of Yosef. And every woman would sort of throw their jewelry towards Yosef. But she, Osnas, didn't have anything to throw. All that she had was this kamiyah that her grandfather Yaakov had given her, and she threw this kamiyah at Yosef. And Yosef HaTzadik looked and read this kamiyah, and Yosef saw that she was the descendant, the granddaughter of Yaakov, V'nasa, and he married her. So an astonishing sort of side story as to who exactly Osnas was. Not so well known, so far as I know, but fascinating nonetheless. So there we have it, 3 ideas in this week's Parsha. And then we'll have the Chanukah Shiur, which will go be uploaded separately. But the first idea is 2,025 words in Parshas Mikeitz that we're told at the end when it's told the Simonim. Why dafka here? So the famous Vilna Gaon, that to describe that Potiphera is one word or two words, but also 2025 alludes to Chanukah. How so? That Ner is Gematria 250 times the 8 nights of Chanukah is 2000 plus 25th day of Kislev is 2025. But the very interesting point that we added this year is that the same number of psukim in Parshas Mikeitz as there is in Parshas Bereshis, Kuf Mem Vav 146, with the same simonim, and the sort of the common theme between the two is that HaKadosh Baruch Hu not only creates the world but runs the world, and as seen by the whole story in Parshas Mikeitz. Then we saw Rabbi Fran's beautiful idea of Yosef's wisdom. Why did he press on and actually suggest the solution? Not only just interpreting, he suggested a solution, and Yosef understood that he would only be able to, he did that because that's the only way they're going to accept the dream, as described, a bit of an echo of the Purim story with Haman. And then lastly, this fascinating Das Zakenim regarding the backstory, the side story of exactly who Osnas was, that she was none other than daughter of Dinah, and Shechem, the granddaughter of Yaakov Avinu, and that's who Yosef HaTzadik married. Thank you.